Luke Rockhold just got viciously knocked out. Darren Till is on a win streak, and Tony Ferguson got a win. We are right back in 2018. And crazy enough, Dillon Danis is an MMA world champion. The Misfits boxing card that happened just today was filled with crazy MMA related headlines. There was a lot of former UFC fighters on the card and of course Dillon Danis. This card actually made some noise. I feel like I never hear anything about a Misfits card, but today we have a lot to talk about. So stick around to hear exactly what happened at Misfits today. I'm Wyatt and this is Fight Society. Okay, so Luke Rockhold folded like a lawn chair. Tony Ferguson is an undefeated boxer, and Dillon Danis is an MMA world champion. Now, there's a lot to get to, but a lot of what seemed to be completely irrelevant names in MMA at this point all made a big splash today at Misfits, including Dillon Danis winning the first Misfits MMA fight ever and getting a championship for it. Now, Dillon Danis actually won his fight in 15 seconds. And Dillon Danis has not competed since he lost to Logan Paul in boxing. And that was just a total shit show. He pulled guard during a boxing fight. He got himself in a bunch of legal trouble and lawsuits with Logan Paul's wife. And it's been a long 2 years or so since that fight. And Dillon Danis, similar to Conor McGregor, his training partner, finds a way to stay in the headlines even when he's completely inactive in the sport, and even when a lot of the sport does not take him seriously. But he made his comeback today. I know people don't take Dillon Danis seriously, but he was a jiu-jitsu world champion. He was a big part of Conor McGregor's success during his prime, takedown defense, defensive jiu-jitsu, and all of that. And I know that he's kind of just like a rage-baiting troll at this point. Most of the fan base doesn't take him seriously, but he is a legit martial artist. I mean, here he is right here today. He got a 15-second finish in the first Misfits MMA fight ever. So here it is right here. So you see him, Dillon Danis, get clipped with that uppercut right here and that jab. But as soon as Warren Spencer shoots this takedown, Dillon snatches the guillotine, goes to mounted guillotine, and the fight's over. 15 seconds is all it took Dillon Danis to become an MMA world champion. And this Warren Spencer guy, by no means is an actually good opponent. This was more of like the big name. I guess he's a big name in the UK that they could use to draw viewers against Dillon Danis, because Dillon Danis, especially with he's pulled out of fights himself, he's a liability to the promotion that he's fighting for. He starts fights backstage. He fucks up press conferences and all these different media events. It costs him because they won't get him big opponents. And especially when he does that and doesn't always show up, it's hard to get big names to commit to a training camp to fight you if you're going to cause problems the entire time and then pull out like 2 weeks from the fight. Again, nasty jiu-jitsu though. Dillon Danis has always been impressive with the grappling. His striking's very sus. He got clipped twice in the first couple seconds, but Dillon Danis' entire MMA career is like a total of 2 minutes through like 3 or 4 fights. He's gotten submissions fast in every single fight so far. So here it is again. Weak takedown. It's Dillon Danis, world champ jiu-jitsu player. You can't just dive into a double leg like that and expect to not get choked. And he slid into the mount right there. Good thing for Dillon Danis to get a win here. It's been like a lot of losses. The Logan Paul fight was embarrassing. He's getting sued for a bunch of money by them. And this is him getting an actual kind of some dubs here because Conor McGregor doesn't really associate with him that much anymore. So Dillon Danis has kind of been fighting for relevancy the last couple of years since the Logan Paul fight. He gets this win. Who do they call into the ring is strongman and kind of MMA fighter Eddie Hall, and they agree to fight in MMA. Here it is right here. And so there it is. And Dillon Danis said, I'm 170. If you can get under 300 pounds, we'll fight. And I'll be honest, Dillon Danis would win that fight. He'd smoke Eddie Hall. It's a world-class jiu-jitsu fighter. against a strongman. I know he's massive and super strong, and he's won MMA fights before. He actually trains, but it is Dillon Danis. Not to glaze, but it is Dillon Danis. And this is like a huge, like, y'all must have forgot type of moment. And you can see this win right here was a big relief for him too. You can see the look on his face right here, because a loss right here to some random fucking bum named Warren Spencer would have been the end of Dillon Danis's combat sports career, unless he was just to kind of like walk back to jiu-jitsu with his tail between his legs and try to like rebuild from there. But this is a big deal for Dillon Danis. Now, Dillon Danis getting a professional MMA win might actually help his case with getting to the UFC, because Dillon Danis tried to get into the UFC. He wanted to go on The Ultimate Fighter. If you guys remember, he talked about that as well. He literally told Dana he would go on The Ultimate Fighter and live in the house with all those basically unknown fighters as a massive star in the sport himself as a way to get into the UFC. And either Dana or Hunter Campbell just thinks that Dillon Danis is a liability from a promotional standpoint, especially as the UFC goes from ESPN to Paramount Plus, and they're going to go even more mainstream in this next deal because they're going to be on regular TV with CBS and all of that. You're going to see kind of like the sanitation of the sport even more. They might stop giving certain fighters post-fight interviews like Hamzat and all of that. Dillon Danis would be in there as well. But him getting a professional MMA win, who knows? He's tied to Conor McGregor. I assume that a couple more MMA wins could get Dillon Danis in the UFC. Let's be honest, there's a million top tier prospects that are out there from everywhere from America to Dagestan to Brazil that are going to be UFC champs someday. But I guarantee you, most of the fan base would care so much more about a Dillon Danis fight in the UFC right now after a win like that, or maybe even after beating Eddie Hall or something like that. Most fans would much rather watch that than some guy that's 10-0, just got signed, big prospect, big name. Dillon Danis could be on a pay-per-view main card for the UFC right now. I hope that as they move into the next deal, maybe they pull him in. But quick break. If you're loving this video and you want more from Fight Society, click that join button down below to become a channel member today, where you'll get access to members-only live streams, behind-the-scenes vlogs, and all the unfiltered stuff that we don't post to the main channel. Back to the video. Another big headline for this event is Tony Ferguson, one of my favorite fighters of all time, one of the biggest characters in MMA, one of the hardest fighters to beat in his prime. If you guys remember, he went on a 12-fight win streak. He went on a 12-fight win streak and lost his interim belt because he tore his ACL on a production cable backstage during fight week when he was supposed to be fighting Khabib. Obviously, never was able to fight Khabib. Ended up fighting Justin Gaethje, where he was beaten brutally, really took years off of his career, years off of his life probably. Went on an 8-fight losing streak from there. It included Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler, Paddy Pimblett, Michael Chiesa, Bobby Green. He lost, I mean, they were good names, but they were good names that were over the hill, except for Paddy Pimblett, who's still a rising star, and Charles Oliveira, of course, who went on to become champion. All of those losses in a row led to his UFC release and him boxing Salt Papi as the co-main event of this Misfits fight, or this Misfits card. When they first announced this fight, I made a video about it, and I was sitting here saying, this is fucked up. We're going to watch like a 22-year-old. I mean, I know Salt Papi's a TikToker or a YouTuber or something like that. He's like 22 years old going up against Tony, who's 41 at this point and has been knocked out a lot, especially in the last 3 years. He's been knocked out a lot. And I was just like, okay, here we go. Some random YouTuber is going to build his name in this crossover combat sports promotion off of Tony Ferguson, which kind of sucks. And I was super against this fight at first from a booking standpoint, you know, age difference. Tony's lost a lot recently, but I still did say I thought Tony would win. I still had the faith. And here he is right here. TKO in round 3. A controversial stoppage, but this is the TKO right here.
Tony starting to find more and more success with a lead right hand.
You see Tony starts to land big punches, puts a lot of pressure on him. And the ref steps in right there. And Tony Ferguson drops to his knees crying. He has not won a fight. Think about this. We're in the second half of 2025, and Tony Ferguson, one of the best lightweights ever, even one of the best lightweights recently, hasn't won a fight since like 2018, 2019. So not only is Dillon Danis in MMA winning world titles, but Tony Ferguson is on a win streak. And I'm not going to play like Tony's going to find his way back to the UFC with this, but Tony could be carving himself out a good post-UFC career if he can fight like this. I mean, you can put him in there in these boxing matches against Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal, definitely not Jake Paul or somebody like that, but Jorge Masvidal, Nate Diaz, Tyron Woodley, all of those basically just random cards where retired UFC fighters get thrown like $200K to fight each other. Whatever that whole shtick or whatever that whole racket is that goes on with like these betting platforms that put on cards and then pay these ex-UFC fighters a bunch of money. Tony has a career, 3, 4, 5 more fights where he can bring home like an actually good paycheck with that. And if he's going to be fighting people like Salt Papi, he'll actually have a chance at winning and not taking a bunch of brain damage. So shout out to Tony breaking his 8-fight losing streak multiple years in a row with a win. And you can see it meant a lot to him. I know some of you guys in the comments are going to say, oh yeah, he beat a fucking YouTuber. Why is he crying? He was a former UFC interim champion, and kind of hate on it. But for as much of us, for us that are hardcore fans, as much as we know how emotional Tony's story is and also how riddled his entire career is with mental health problems and injuries, of course, the longest winning streak in lightweight history and the longest losing streak in lightweight history. It's crazy when you think about that. And all of the personal problems, never getting to fight Khabib. Those that have followed Tony Ferguson's story, we understand how big this moment is, even if it's just some dumb crossover card in the UK against a TikToker. It's still Tony Ferguson winning a fight. Here was his reaction right here. It was a big deal to him. And you know, somebody like Tony, who has just spent his entire life fighting, finally getting that monkey off of his back of that long losing streak. You know that when you're a fighter like that, you see what people say about you on social media. You're washed. You need to retire. You're going to die in the ring if you keep fighting, all of that. For him to believe in himself, and still, I know it's just some dumb Misfits card, but it is a professional fight, professional boxing match, a professional win for Tony Ferguson after all of that. I think that's pretty cool, regardless of, you know, how low level his opponent is that he beat. It's Tony Ferguson, man. So we move on to the main event, which was former UFC middleweight champion Luke Rockhold and former UFC middleweight contender and former UFC welterweight title challenger Darren Till. One of the most hyped prospects that we ever had in the sport was Darren Till. Obviously, it didn't quite pan out. He left the sport after getting submitted by Dricus du Plessis a couple years ago, took some time off, but now he's on a winning streak. Darren Till in 2025 is on a winning streak, and he absolutely cooked Luke Rockhold. This was him dropping Luke Rockhold in the first round. Oh. And you can see here, this ref literally wanted Luke Rockhold to die. Luke Rockhold is like falling and stumbling all over the ring. Can't even stand up. And the ref's like, oh yeah, cool. Fucking 7, 8, right back to it. You see it here. He's falling all over the ring. He almost can't stand up. It takes him 3 tries to stand up, and then he almost falls over once he's up. And the ref is, that's what goes on with these Misfits cards. They want them to be entertaining. They want highlight reel knockouts. So I will be honest, the refs do give very, very long leashes for stoppages when they shouldn't, especially at this point when you have a Tony Ferguson, you have a Luke Rockhold, people like that are 40 plus that have been viciously knocked out 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times in their career, especially in their late 40s and how old they are. You have to protect the fighter a little bit more. So I know there's a lot of talk online about Misfits kind of mishandling these older fighters that they've signed. And I agree. I understand wanting to bring these guys in because they're big names with UFC headlining experience, championship experience. These are names that add so much credibility to your card. But if you're going to benefit, obviously they get a paycheck from it, but if you're going to benefit from having their name on the card, you have to at least look out for the fighter. I know most fans would say this is a dumb take because they are in the cage or in the ring losing brain cells for money. This is what they signed up for, but it should be fighter safety first, especially somebody that's, I mean, guys, we've seen Luke Rockhold flatlined, folded in half like 6 or 7 times in the last 5 years. Am I not wrong? I mean, he took a couple of years off, but since 2018, we've seen him get fucking folded a lot of times. The Yoel Romero knockout, Of course, the Michael Bisping knockout, this knockout. He got his fucking teeth knocked out of his mouth in BKFC by Mike Perry. For fuck's sake, somebody pay for some, Derek Moneyberg, pay for some private jiu-jitsu lessons with Luke Rockhold so that he could stop getting knocked out for like $100,000. This was the actual finish, because that was just the drop at the end of the first round. This was the actual knockout that folded Luke Rockhold like a lawn chair. And this caption is correct. Darren Till fucking caught a body. Watch this.
Right now.
Yeah.
And there he is. Oh my God, that's so brutal.
Right now.
Yeah.
Oh, that's rough. And it's like Luke Rockhold's one of those guys that can never have like a good knockout loss. Like Yoel Romero fucking kneed his head into the front row. Jan Blachowicz knocked him out to where he was like choking on his mouthpiece while he was unconscious. Darren Till just folded him. Mike Perry had him spitting his own teeth out after like a minute and a half of fighting. It sucks because Luke Rockhold is actually super, super talented, and he's just super cringe and gets knocked out in goofy ways that make people think he's a joke, but he's actually like literally probably like a top 6 or 7 middleweight of all time. Crazy to think about that, considering the narrative about Luke Rockhold out there. But yeah, nasty fucking KO for Darren Till. Pretty sick to see right here. Dillon Danis, Tony Ferguson, and Darren Till all took a picture together before they fought, and they all won by finish tonight early. I like all of these guys, so I'm a little bit biased, but Darren Till, heartbreaking, not heartbreaking, but very disappointing UFC run where he goes from the next big thing out of the UK, massive star, rushed him to a title shot, and he lost to Tyron Woodley, and it was kind of all downhill from there. Dillon Danis kind of never got his MMA career started. He spent a little bit too much time tying himself to Conor and depending on Conor to boost his name and get him fights and get him booked with Bellator, things like that. And so he actually got a win with nobody in his corner. He didn't have Conor in his corner. He didn't have Bellator backing him because they need a big star. This was Dillon Danis, inactive for 2 years after a bad loss to Logan Paul, coming back and getting a sick win in 15 seconds. And he's still young. Him and Darren Till are both like 32. These guys both could actually make, for Darren Till, a return to the UFC, for Dillon Danis, a debut. This could be one of the more random but funny and cool storylines in MMA. And then, of course, Tony Ferguson probably setting himself up for some sort of Tyron Woodley, Nate Diaz, things like that. The only thing that I want to talk about before this video ends is what is next specifically for Darren Till. And there's one matchup that has to take place. I know he's booked. He's going to be fighting Gervonta Davis on Netflix in November. Darren Till versus Jake Paul. They're the same size. Darren Till literally fought for a UFC title. He's a sick kickboxer. He's a good boxer. If Jake wants to be taken seriously as a light heavyweight or cruiserweight, whatever he is in boxing, I forget the weight classes, if he wants to be taken seriously, he could beat a professional fighter that fought for a UFC title in his own weight class. This would be way more legitimizing to Jake's career than him being 6'2", 190, 200, 210 pounds, fighting Gervonta Davis, who's 5'5", 140 pounds. Like, that fight's going to be a joke. We'll talk about that in a different video, but this is the fight right here. Jake Paul, Darren Till. Big payday for Darren Till. You know, that's a good story, especially the way his UFC career ended, but also legitimizing Jake Paul. It's a win-win for Jake Paul. If he goes out there and loses, you go, oh yeah, it's Darren Till. Darren Till's fucking a nasty striker. And then if he wins, you go, oh shit, Jake Paul beat somebody that was a UFC middleweight, like top 5, and a UFC welterweight title challenger. So very interesting. I wasn't expecting to make a video about Misfits today. I thought this was going to be Tony getting knocked out, Dillon Danis putting on a shit show, and to be fair, I expected Darren Till to knock out Luke Rockhold, but I thought it was just going to be like, oh yeah, cool. Tony lost again. Dillon Danis made a joke out of an event, and Darren Till beat Luke Rockhold, who has no chin. But it ended up being a super sick card. I'm excited. Darren Till versus Jake Paul should be next. Get Dillon Danis in the UFC. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you want more from Fight Society? Like and subscribe below this video, and click the join button to become a channel member today to get access to behind the scenes vlogs and members only live streams.